Hello there, friends! It's time to discuss the latest news of the year. I don't think anything outstanding will happen in the coming days, so let's talk. Replacements in OG and Faze, some news about Source 2, and finally, some results that HLTV themselves summed up. So guys, there's a lot of information for us to unpack. Let's get straight to it. We will start with the reshuffles, as always, since there are a lot of things to discuss. First off, the Brazilians from Imperial. Fallen initially assembled this lineup as some kind of veteran media squad, and each player was adored by the whole Brazil. But apparently, this formula doesn't work in competitive CS, so they are now considering roster changes. According to rumors, they are planning to replace Fer with Jota, the best MIBR player. FNX, who fulfilled the role of a coach at the last tournaments, will also leave the team. He tweeted that he wanted to return to the game and become a regular player again, but in different organization. So it turns out that this whole Brazilian last dance of the oldies fell apart. Now there's only Fallen and 4 relatively young guys. Well, this is what everyone has been talking about since the very beginning of this project. People expected that this wouldn't last long, and the audience suggested Fallen gathering young boys, and that way he would calmly ruin the Brazilian pro scene. But in fact, he only realized it a year later. The guys from Flaxo will hold the torch of Brazilian reshuffles next. They plan to buy out the sniper from Nines, and that is NQZ. And also, these guys are making up strategies to lure the legendary coach Zeus to their team. After a heart attack, he seemed to be planning to end his career, but apparently now he feels much better, so he's ready to break in the pro scene again. It turns out that next year there will be several interesting teams that will compete with Furia. In addition to the Brazilian reshuffles, we have other replacements. For example, Lollipop didn't sit around without a team for a long time, and immediately after one win, he moved to Webster's, which is a purely Belarusian team. I decided to look it up, and all the players except ZNX at one time played in Nimiga. It turns out that Lollipop returned to the place he had left once, only this time the name of the team is different. But let's discuss something more interesting. FaZe Clan. It would seem that the team had a great year, the best in the history of the organization. They've won the major and a lot of other memorable tournaments. Everything is just cool. But then, all of a sudden, we get to see the headlines that no one expected at all. Firstly, the organization is experiencing huge financial problems, and it's not some insiders who are talking about this, but the Forbes magazine itself. According to their calculations, if FaZe does not attract new investments, the club will last only a year, and it will go bankrupt afterwards. They have about only $50 million in their accounts, keeping in mind that the organization has a lot of lineups, streamers, and all sorts of contracts. FaZe's main problems have to do with their debuting on the stock market. Initially, one share of the organization cost $20. However, later the share price has dropped to $1.7 a piece. That is, their capitalization has fallen by more than 10 times. Plus, they spent a lot of money on various events and invited Snoop Dogg to their team, which cost them $2 million. In short, the top management was not particularly worried about finances, and now the organization is one step away from bankruptcy. I think it's too early for fans to create any sort of panic about it. I mean, after all, this organization is huge and has a big name, so it won't be so difficult for them to attract new investments. On the other hand, if everything goes according to a bad scenario, then FaZe will leave the market by the end of the next year, and this will be crazy. The same thing can be said about the following rumors about substitutions in their roster. Recently, Overdrive spilled some interesting info.
Говорят, Фейз Рейн возьмет длительный отпуск из-за того, что у него ребенок появится. И Фейза будет стенд-ин, очень возможно, игрок из России. Но это вообще не точно, это вообще вилами по воде. И очень интересно, чем все закончится.
If Rain really takes a break, as Glaive did when he was expecting the birth of his child not long ago, who can replace him? Many people have thought about Inders, but it's still unknown if he has a decent level of English, and it seems to me that the roles are not particularly suitable. Friends, what do you think? Which player can replace Rain in FaZe? Write in the comments below. Replacements are also being prepared in OG, and again it was Overdrive who tweeted about it. Lately, a lot of information has been coming from him, and in fact, I think it was obvious to everyone. The newcomers are really unstable, and Dexter and Flames are not enough to shoot down the best teams in the world. However, Dexter himself quickly denied this information. He said there was no point in believing all these rumors, even if it comes from Overdrive, after which Overdrive wrote in response, "Unfortunately, I often learn the information before players do, but you're staying in OG for now, don't worry." And it seemed that a typical Twitter battle was about to begin, but then Dexter apparently also received new information and wrote, "Wait for the news, soon." So it turns out there will be replacements in OG, and it seems to me that the choice here is pretty obvious. They need a rifler, and in a perfect scenario it would be an experienced and stable one, and the one to be able to add firepower, and right now we have only one sitting idle. This one, of course, is Config. I feel like you can't think of a more perfect option, but OG may have their own opinion. And who do you think will be the new player under Nexa's wing? And finally, something you've been waiting for on the reshuffle segment. This is yet another news about the Bad Boom team. Recently, insiders have been bombarding us with the news about the new lineup. Someone is 100% sure that there will be Boomich, and someone on the contrary says that he won't. Let's figure it all out. First, Jerry from Force confirmed that such a project was planned. The squad with Boomich, Jerry, Flamey, Deco and Ankare. This one is true. But it didn't happen because there were some screw-ups in terms of roles and in the roster itself. The whole idea fell apart like a house of cards. I initially understood that. Yes, we were thinking about that and there was an opportunity to make it happen. Would it have turned out the way Ankare described on his stream? The composition would look different, most likely. At the moment, Boomich will be playing in the Bad Boom team. That is, Jerry confirms that Boomich will definitely be in this team. This was also confirmed by Zoner. According to his info, the lineup will consist of Forrester, Nickelback, Boomich, and their coach will be Hooch. But according to the information from another insider, Harumi, Boomich is not in the composition of Bad Boom at all. He also confirmed the participation of other guys, and yet more authoritative people say that he will still be in this lineup. So we will wait for the announcement. And finishing with the teams and players from the CIS, here's what Overdrive said about Deco. One Win receives a lot of offers about Deco, and despite the fact that his contract ends in April, he most likely will not renew it. The organization doesn't plan to let him go, requesting an exorbitant price for the transfer. And this is how Deco ended up in a golden cage. He could easily switch to Liquid or any other team, as for example at one time he was invited to ENCE. But now he is a tier 2 level, gets his paycheck, and that's it. And the last thing about reshuffles is our old pal Guardian. He was left without a team again. He was a part of S1MPLE and took a break in September due to health conditions. But at the end of the year he decided not to return to the squad. Apparently this is definitely the end of a career for a once great AWPer. After returning to Navi, his career went downhill rapidly. And now let's sum up this year's results. In addition, all sorts of media, tournament operators and so on present to us some type of final stats. For example, Navi, FaZe and G2 are among the top 10 most viewed teams of the year. The other 7 of them are almost all from League of Legends, which is not surprising to be honest. League of Legends is very much ahead in numbers. This year they gathered more than 5 million viewers at the peak of the broadcast of the final. In the second place we have League of Legends again, only this time the mobile version. CS is only in the third place, with a peak of 2.1 million viewers. However, if you look at the popularity of shooters on Twitch in general, Valorant is tearing CSGO to shreds. In total, viewers watched Valorant almost 2 times more than CSGO. This is where the viewing time is taken into account. And by the peak of online, Valorant is very close too. If Valve doesn't release Source 2, it's quite possible that in the next couple of years the shooter from Riot will be ahead of CS. Well, and maybe not. We will see. By the way, there's also news about Source 2, but we'll talk about that a bit later. In the meantime, we continue to summarize the results. And it turned out that Cloud9 is the best T-sided team at big tournaments. And at the same time, many people from the community strongly criticize Nefani, although his team won almost half of all rounds while playing for T-side. Next up we have Navi, Mouse, FaZe and G2, but Cloud9 played 2 times fewer maps than others, which slightly belittles their merits. And we are moving on. The best T-side player is also from Cloud9. This is Shiro. Then we have ZYWOO, s1MPLE, Exile and finally K-Serrato. By the way, s1MPLE is worse than ZYWOO judging by a lot of indicators. For example, last year s1MPLE was the best in terms of statistics on almost all maps. This time he's the best only on Mirage, and ZYWOO is the best on Dust and Nuke. And in general, s1MPLE is not such an undisputed leader this time. According to the general stats, he is the best player only in number of clutches won and the number of kills per round. In the overall ranking, he shares the first place with Shiro. And the main indicator in which s1mple loses, and by a large margin, is the rating in the playoffs of major tournaments. And HLTV themselves have said many times that for them this is one of the most important indicators when calculating their top. Yes, ZYWOO has played 2 times less rounds, but the gap of 10 hundredths is just a lot. s1mple is only 5th in terms of this indicator. HLTV also takes into account how much the player's rating in the playoffs differs from the total for the whole year. And here s1mple is already in the 19th place. ZYWOO is 2nd after Jame. His rating is 7 hundredths better than the average for the year. s1mple's rating in the playoffs is 4 hundredths worse than the average. It turns out that he plays worse than his usual abilities in the decisive matches. In general, the more I compare all these indicators, the more I begin to doubt the fact that s1mple will definitely be top 1 without any changes. I will present my personal top soon. I will try to do it until the new year. Now I'm actively doing all the calculations, making all sorts of tables. The work is in full swing, it remains only to finish the calculations and write a script. HLTV themselves will present their top from January 1st, and for the first time they will announce 2 places a day. All this is done in order to hold an award ceremony on January 14th, where they will announce the top 3 best players of the year. So we are waiting. In addition, HLTV sums up other results. For example, they showed who performed online the best and how they performed on LANs. It turned out that TarzZ was the worst in this indicator, from rating of 1.25 to 1.04, but Magix, on the contrary, feels much better on LAN events. His rating compared to online is 0.18 higher. HLTV also presented the most incredible comeback of this year. The artificial intelligence gave a little more than 1% to the possibility of a comeback for Cloud9 on Overpass against Imperial. In the second place, we have the recent Navi's comeback against Liquid. Remember that crazy attack on Ancient? In fact, this was all that Navi managed to show at the Blast. It's funny that there are 2 comebacks against G2 simultaneously. First, they lost to FaZe on Inferno with a score of 7-15, then again on Inferno with the same score, only now to Vitality. They clearly had something wrong with their mental side. And finally, on these results, we have the most unexpected defeats. And this is the case when HLTV's rating does not mean anything. In the first place, the same G2 with their defeat from Gamer Legion, top 5 of the world against top 60. They are 55 places away from each other, and because of this painful loss, G2 didn't get the chance to get into the major. This is probably the most shameful match on the tier 1 scene for the whole year. Navi is in the second place with their defeat to Endpoint. They have a difference of 36 places, not as terrible as in the case with G2, and the match was not the decisive one. As you remember, the Born to Win still managed to get into the playoffs. In general, there are a lot of results. The year was very eventful. I think we're to see a bunch of more interesting statistics. But let's talk about Source 2 now. I understand that many people no longer believe in all these insights, how many times it all has been fake. I agree, but I can't ignore it and not tell you. According to Aquaris, a Russian-speaking insider, Valve plans to switch to Source 2 in the first quarter of the next year. Well, we are introduced to new dates, new expectations and new disappointments. But in order not to end the video on such a note, I'd better tell you how much SMUYA earned at different stages of his career. In BIG, I first received 2,500 euros per month. We had the same salary even when we were taking the 5th place in the world ranking. When I joined the lineup for the second time, I received 7,000 euros. During my time in BIG's reserve, my salary was 3,000 euros. In Chaos, I had $10,000, and in Fnatic, I had $3,000. During my whole time in Fnatic, I received $12,000, but I had to give up all my sponsors, so I returned $22,000 to them. It turns out I ended up in the red to play for Fnatic. If I was paid $50,000 in a good team, or even $10,000, I would play for it. But no one wants to risk signing a contract with me. They say I'm a risk for their brand. For example, there's a player in Fnatic, I will not mention his name, who gets paid 40,000 euros per month. That's quite a difference. SMUYA is paid 3,000 and someone is getting 40. I think it's obvious that only Crims can get such a salary. The rest are newcomers in the team and they don't have much experience behind them. More interesting news came from Fear, a former Navi junior captain. He said that at one time Flames, Beamus and Wonderful could get into the Navi Academy, and if this had happened, then now the main Navi team could have taken, for example, Beamus in place of SDY. That was was the last news release of the year. At least that's what I think. I will try to finish the top 20 players of the year in the coming days. Thank you all for watching, commenting, and staying with me. I really appreciate it. See you soon.